Hey everybody, this is Jason Alba, and it is Wednesday, May 6th, and I miss you guys. I did YouTube Lives every day for the month of April, and I actually squeezed in a few extras when I interviewed people, but the April run is over, and now I'm getting down to about once a week. Today I'm really excited because, as you know, I talk a lot about career topics. And a friend of mine, a Pluralsight author from Poland, reached out to me, and we've been in conversations over the last few months. And I did a webinar for a bunch of job seekers that he runs a network group for, and he said, hey, I want to talk about career switchers and people who aren't technical and people who are interested in getting into technology. And I'm all about that because a lot of the people on Jibber Jobber they're kind of sick and tired of job search, and a lot of them are like, well, I'm not really dying to get back into what I used to do, and the job search is a great time to really recalibrate and think about a transition. And so that's the conversation that we're going to have today. He said I can call him Peter, but the pronunciation I'll try is Piotr.
Splendid.
Piotr. All right, good enough. So Piotr, welcome to the live stream, and tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Okay, I've been coding and I've been in tech for quite some time right now. The recent, 2 years, I've decided that I might start actually sharing what I've learned so far. So I started writing articles, creating video courses, teaching in-person courses, and most of the audience for these courses are, of course, people who would like to switch their careers or trying to figure out whether they could use some tech skills in their current careers to do what they do, but upgrade their skills, basically. So that's the current focus.
I think a lot of people in whatever job they're in, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, you could go and do your work and be good at what you do and not worry about advances in technology. But I can't think of any department today that is untouched by changes in technology, right? So if you're in sales, you got to learn Salesforce or whatever CRM the company has. And so where before you were like, hey, I'm really good at making phone calls and writing down my notes on a piece of paper, the requirements now are you need to adapt to the technology because companies are paying for all these SaaS programs. No matter what your job role is, there's technology that you need to get into. And so I'm reading on your Pluralsight author page that you've been coding since you were 10. So you're one of those people.
Yes, I'm one of those. The reason is that when my parents bought the first PC, there were no games on it, and all of my friends didn't have a PC. They have Commodores or Amigas, so I couldn't just borrow games. So I got a bunch of books about QBasic, and the parents were like, okay, so learn yourself some programming and write your own game. And yeah, that's how it all started.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I remember I was probably 11 or 12, and my parents came home with an Apple, I think it was an Apple IIe. And this must have been in like 84 or so. Yeah, 84 or 85. And, I remember we set it up on this big, huge furniture thing. I don't even know what they're called, but like this massive desk thing with a roller top. And there were some games that we had, but I never knew that there was people like you and Aaron Sconard, who is the founder of Pluralsight. There's people who dug into the computer and they're like, hey, what can I make on my own? Like, I didn't have the level of curiosity or creativity. For me, it was like, okay, where's the disk to play a game instead of what can I build or create? And so I think it's pretty awesome to have curiosity inherently as part of one of your characteristics. Let's talk about when you reached out to me, you were talking about your recent course, which is on it's called Open Source Your GitHub Project. So let me bring that up here real quick. This is Piotr's Pluralsight page. And to everybody who speaks Polish, I'm sorry about the way I pronounce your name, but I'm trying anyways.
It's fine.
This second course you did was Open Source Your GitHub Project. And as you and I were talking just a few minutes ago, one of my thoughts was, if I am interested in getting into technology, that scares me. Like GitHub, I don't even know what that means. Open source, let's say I even get what open source means, that I understand that it's kind of free software that I don't have to go buy. And maybe I even understand that in the open source world, there's a place where the code sits and people can come in and like fix a bug or make an improvement or something like that. Even if I understand that much, that's scary to me. Like as a newbie, as someone who hasn't really started programming or whatever. So help me understand the vision of why someone who's interested in a tech career should, even at this stage, think about and be interested in whatever this open source world is.
Okay, let's start this way. Do you like food?
Too much. Too much.
Oh, we have that in common. Okay, you like food. Imagine you would like to cook some delicious meal on your own, because that's what you want to do. How would you approach this? Who would you contact? How would you try to, I don't know, learn the basics of cooking to prepare your own delicious meal?
Well, I would go to my mom, who's an excellent cook, first. And I mean, I love to cook. I'm in the kitchen quite a bit. The other thing that I love to do is I just go look at recipes. I'll pick a dish that I want, and I will go get like 5 different recipes and put them on the counter, and then just pick and choose and make my own meal out of what I like from each recipe. Okay,
so it looks like you're good. You'll be a good open source developer, because the way that open source software works is that you not only get the end product, for example, the burrito or whatever you want to eat, you also get access to the recipe and all the steps required to prepare this meal. So you can just check everything, learn everything, see how others are doing, whatever it takes to have excellent product. You can follow their steps. You can, if you're brave enough, you can ask them how they approach different problems, for example. And you can also remix some things. For example, get instructions on how to make one thing, but for example, substitute some images to other ones that better suit your mood. You want to, I don't know, custom color scheme or whatever else in your web browser, no problem. You go where the open source project for your browser is hosted, download it, and build it. Of course, it's not as easy or as hard as cooking. Depends on what are your inclinations for that. But it is entirely possible. And basically seeing how things are built, seeing how you can rebuild them, what you can change, is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to learn. You can buy a set of Lego bricks, right, and go with the instruction, with the manual, and just set everything like every other person is probably doing. But you can just throw all the bricks on the floor and figure out, okay, how can I match them? What can I do with them to create something of my own? And this way, you not only exercise creativity, but you also learn some cool things about the bricks that probably even their producers didn't thought about. And when you said that you would go to your mother or you would go get some recipes to prepare a dish, currently the biggest place where you can find recipes for different open source projects is the GitHub. It might look scary for newcomers because there are a lot of things that people probably won't understand, but it is also possible to figure out the basic things from just going to one project and reading the README file, for example, which is usually the gateway to every project. It describes what it does, how it's built, etc. By doing that, you could at least have an idea about whether it is something that you should be interested in or not. So
okay, so
that's the open source in a nutshell.
If I'm creative, I love that. That's a great explanation. If I'm creative and I'm curious and I have my own ideas and I have ideas of how things should be built or how they should look or whatever, then going into open source projects sounds really exciting to me because I could go in and see how other people did things. I might want to go in and clean some stuff up or, say, hey, this is this long and it's just too much and too complex. So let's make it this long and that still does the same thing. Or I can see how other people think. Like that's actually pretty cool. So I like that. I guess my issue is going to be how do I get to a point where I'm ready to do that, right? Like at what point am I proficient enough to go into GitHub and find something that I'm like, oh, I can contribute to this?
Okay. There's good news and there's bad news for this question. The good news is that probably everyone at any given point in time can contribute to open source project on GitHub, because the main thing that open source projects are built of is usually code, and this requires pretty deep technical knowledge, but that's not all of it. Each project also has some user interface, right? So for example, some menus and some copy in the project itself, maybe some graphics, maybe some sounds. There are also other things that people can contribute to. And for example, if we have a project that is only available in English, there's a possibility for a person that knows English and any other language just to translate this project and contribute by translating the project. Actually, that's how I started contributing to open source. I had too much time on my hands. I was a student back then, and I saw a cool project that I was personally using, and I thought, okay, it's in English. Maybe I should translate it to Polish because I don't have anything better to do right now. I did that, and after a few months, a friend approached me and said, "Oh, I see that you're using this project." And I'm like, "Okay, how do you know that?" "Oh, because I saw that you've done the translation for it." "Oh, yeah, probably I did." So you can start contributing early on, using your existing skills, using your copywriting skills, translation skills, maybe marketing skills. This can all translate to an open source project of your choice.
Yeah, and contributing, and that goes to another thing that you chatted to me about a few weeks ago, which was doing open source work is a great way of building portfolio. And the course, it's okay. So contributing to open source, it sounds like it's like, why would I do that? Like that's my time. I'm not getting paid for it. I might not even get a thank you, or maybe my contribution is so minor that nobody will even notice. But you're talking about spending time in open source as a way to, what a lot of people are saying is build a portfolio. I'm going to change that a little bit. I love that, but also to quantify what your expertise and your passions are, right? Like when you contribute to open source or multiple open source projects, you can say, hey, here I translated to help other people who speak my language be able to participate. Here I did this with the code. Here I did that. Like, it's really a great way to show your interest, your passion, and kind of your, not necessarily your hobbies, but it shows a hiring manager where you're going to spend your free time, right?
Yeah. So there are two approaches with open source projects. One is that you can create your own open source projects. You can create, for example, an actual portfolio website that lists other projects that you've did. That's one of the approaches. Also, this open source project that you publish can be anything. It can be a game you wrote in your spare time. It could be some automation script, or maybe a list of useful resources. For example, a list of courses that you attended and you think they are worthy sharing. So you publish them as an open source project, and others can contribute to it at their own. That's also possible. And the other thing is actually contributing to the projects created by others. You either on a technical side or on non-technical side. Open source on GitHub is basically a project led in the open, because there used to be other ways to lead an open source project. Currently, they're mostly in the open, which means that each contribution is visible. It is both visible on the project's side, but also on your side as a contributor. If you have a profile on GitHub, for example, there is this punch card-like calendar that shows whenever you've made some contribution to an open source project. And also below it, there is a list of all those contributions. So if I am a hiring manager and I want to learn a thing about a person that applies to my job, I can check their GitHub project. I can see, okay, they said that they're very proficient with, say, Python. And on this GitHub page, I see that they've also contributed a few things to this project and that project. Oh, and also I see that they wrote some Ruby scripts, and yeah, we are in need of a Ruby developer right now as well. So maybe that's the perfect fit. That's actually the person that we are looking for. So it's no longer just your resume that speaks for you, because you can technically write anything in it, and it's really hard to figure out whether you are telling the truth or not. It's your actions that are doing the speaking. Anybody can just say, okay, I'm gonna check what this person is actually capable of and see all those things there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So just by participating, you're creating that history that becomes your portfolio, and it helps quantify.
Yes.
The other thing that I really recommend people do is the Skill IQ from Pluralsight, because it's, are you familiar much with the Skill IQ on Pluralsight?
A bit, yes.
I think it's one of the most brilliant tools that technologists have to quantify their proficiency, right? So a few years ago, I was helping a friend of mine. I was reviewing his resume, which I don't love reviewing resumes. That's not one of my strengths. But close friends, I review resumes for. And he, on his resume, he was a .NET developer, and he had, maybe 10 or 12 technologies. And then by each technology, he had his own self-professed level of proficiency. And, my issue with that is I don't know what a 5-star .NET developer is compared to a 2 or a 3 or 4-star. I don't know what expert is compared to intermediate. And I think that a lot of times, this is so subjective that the person who's saying it might not even, they might say, they might be experts, but they don't understand, they're looking at these 2 or 3 other people that are better than them saying, well, I'm not their level yet, so I'm going to call myself an intermediate, right? And so we start to have this subjective assessment based on what our ideas and prejudices are. And where the Pluralsight Skill IQ comes in is you take these assessments or tests or whatever you want to call it, and you answer a bunch of questions, and then it tells you how you compare against everybody else who has taken it. And so you can find out that you are, for example, in the 95th percentile, right? And so now, instead of guessing between expert, advanced, and intermediate, you can say, out of all the people who have taken this assessment, I answered correctly better than 95% of the people. So these are just a couple of ways that I think that you can really quantify, with GitHub. It shows your contributions. It shows how often you're contributing in, and the areas that you're contributing in. And the Pluralsight Skill IQ gives you a quantifiable number that I would actually love to see developers start putting on their resumes, putting their Skill IQ score, because I've been doing this for a long time and I haven't seen anything that quantifies that way. Let's back up quite a bit and go back. Let's use me as an example. So I programmed 100 years ago, and my language was, in college it was VB, Visual Basic, and I think 3. And then I took an internship at a company where I was doing web programming in Cold Fusion. Have you ever heard of Cold Fusion?
Yeah, sure.
It's really old. I mean, it was a long time ago. And it was interesting because it was at a time when, with Cold Fusion, you had to be on a Microsoft platform. And so you had to have the money to pay for the server license and the database license. And then, I didn't know this at the time, but other people were doing LAMP. They were doing Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP for free, right? And so, and of course, I think PHP was much more functional and broader and deeper than Cold Fusion ever was. But so here I am. I have not programmed since, let's say, 2000 or 2001. It's been a long time. I've been in technology for a long time, right? I mean, I've been in technology my entire career, but after I stopped programming, I managed programmers. I've been heavily involved in product management and things like that. But how would you advise me to start getting back into a developer role or some kind of technical role? I have it in my background. I have a degree in computer information systems. I've been around the web my entire career, but it's been a long time. So what are some steps that you would advise me as a friend to start dipping my toes back into a developer role?
Okay, that's a very deep one. So Cold Fusion is definitely a web technology. So it seems that web stuff might be the easiest way to start. And right now, I think there are two main areas of web development. One is making applications mostly execute in the browser, which means that you learn a lot about designing web pages, designing interactions, designing other things, visual stuff, but not only. And the other approach is with writing the things that go behind the scenes. For example, the database access, crunching some numbers, doing analytics, things like that. So the first question would be, which part do you think might be more exciting for you? Do you, for example, consider yourself a designer, a visual person, an artist. Well, I consider myself an artist, but I'm definitely not good with visuals. So that's why this part of web development is very hard for me, and I rarely do it.
Yeah, let me cut in here real quick. When I developed back in the olden days,
Yeah.
I mean, it was so long ago, I practically developed on a typewriter, right? This was a long time ago. I had a graphics designer that I had access to, and we actually sat in the same cubicle. We had an oversized cubicle, and we were both students. And so we would hit each other throughout the week a few times, but there was times where he would work all day and I wouldn't even see him, right? So, but we worked together so well because I was not graphically inclined. I was not, you know, and nowadays, like CSS, which is something that has a lot to do, everything to do with the presentation of a website, is so far advanced. It's its own thing. Like right now, they have this thing called full stack, right? So full stack is the idea that you have somebody who does everything you just talked about, from the front end all the way back to the database stuff, and they understand every aspect of stuff that goes into creating a website. Back in the olden days, everybody was a full stack developer, right? That everybody did every part of it. But nowadays, you might have somebody who specializes, like you said, someone on the back end that does database stuff and like logical functions and making sure that the you know, like authentication, you know, logging in and logging out actually works. And you might have somebody else who focuses on, does this look really nice? Is this appealing? What's the UX? Does it look good on a mobile device? And if you switch over to a screen or a really big screen, what's going to happen then? I'm definitely inclined to be, one of my favorite things is database. I love database design, and I love SQL. Like I really enjoy the lot. For me, it's like little Lego pieces that make sense logically. And you know, when you get into the front end stuff, which is great, and there are people who really excel in that area. But I remember thinking, you know, back in the olden days, we had to program for like Netscape and Internet Explorer and one other thing that it was mostly those two, but there was one other that I can't remember. Nowadays, you have so many browsers and so many versions, and you have to be like, okay, this looks good on my version of my browser that I'm using, but now we have to test it on 50 other different ways. And for me, that's just too frustrating. Like, I don't like that. So I think it's a great point that you bring up for someone that's thinking about or getting into a development or a technical role. Don't think that you have to be all things, because if you do, nobody who excels really, really well on the front end, on the graphics and the presentation and all that stuff, is going to be amazing at SQL. And nobody who is amazing at SQL, this is stereotyping, but I'm going to say, as an SQL guy, nobody who's really excellent in SQL is going to make anything that looks pretty. Generally, people who are really good at back end make ugly stuff. And that's where you just need to figure out where are my strengths, where do I gravitate towards, and not beat yourself up over not being proficient in the other areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, there are probably quite a few people that can be very, very good at one thing and the other thing, and probably some other things as well, but they usually have some area when they consider it to be their part, their strength, and they do everything else because, well, why not?
They have to. Sometimes they have to.
Sometimes they have to. Sometimes they enjoy trying new things, right? So, for example, I've been doing backend stuff all my life. I want to try something new, something else. It's not really something that I'm really good at, but with a bit of time, I can do an okay job. I wouldn't say I'm really proficient with that. And if you want to start a career in tech or restart a career in tech, like in your case you said, I would suggest starting with something you are already familiar with, something you think you would like, something that can be you can translate some things from your current skills, right? This way it's probably easier for you, and you also have some previous knowledge that you can use. So if you said you're, for example, a database guy, you love SQL, and you've worked with web stuff before that, I would say consider trying Python web development maybe, as Python is pretty popular language nowadays. It's pretty easy to learn, and it's really popular with web development. So there are a lot of jobs right now with that. And in case you figure out, okay, that's maybe not the thing that I really want to do, there are also a lot of other areas when Python is also used. For example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all this stuff. Python is also very popular with that. Yes, data manipulation of all kinds. The famous, for example, picture of the black hole was also stitched by Python scripts. So you have also Python in the I don't know,
aerospace.
Yes, exactly, aerospace.
Well, I mean,
area. It's really general purpose.
What bigger data is there than aerospace, right? Like they're dealing with concepts that are so massive that are incomprehensible.
Oh, definitely.
So on Pluralsight, one of the more popular courses is an intro to Python. There's intro to HTML, intro to CSS. And when I say intro, this is not the little 20 minutes of, hey, here's what CSS is. It's like, let's get our hands dirty and get in there and play around and try some things. And then, of course, they go deeper. There's a few other introduction to programming, just general concepts of what programming is and stuff like that. So Pluralsight has some great resources. Another resource that has been just enormously inspiring for me, and I don't know if you've seen this on Twitter, but the hashtag 100 Days of Code.
Oh, yes.
This has been so inspiring to me. Yeah, it really is. And the people that are doing 100 Days of Code are, I've been there's a lady who I think she just quit her job as a waitress at Applebee's, I think. That's amazing. It's amazing to think that somebody who I don't think of waitresses at Applebee's to be technology people, but she goes to work and does her thing, and when she's at home, she's self-teaching herself and doing 100 days of programming, and she's coming back to Twitter and reporting daily, like, here's what I did today, or here's what I worked on, or here's what I'm learning, or here's the course that I took, or the book or article or whatever that I read. And so there's this accountability factor. But what's awesome to me is, I'm looking at the people who are contributing, and they're from people who have nothing, right? They come from absolutely nothing, but they have access to a computer and internet. And there are some people who have had careers. There's older people on there who, in 50s and 60s, who are looking at a career change. I am just so inspired by the breadth of people who are learning, and they're coming in and it's cool because on day one, they're like, I'm excited, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And on day 20, they're like, I spent 3 hours on this bug and I have no idea what it is, why it is, how to fix it. And then the next day they're like, slept on it, fixed it in 5 minutes, right? Which was my experience as a developer. Yes. I remember I just sit for 4 hours trying to crack some nut on whether it was a bug or how do I do this algorithm or the logic or whatever. And I couldn't figure it out. And then the next morning I come in and I'm like, oh, here's the solution. I just needed to step away, right? Yeah. But anyways, the 100 Days of Code hashtag on Twitter, I would recommend that to anybody who's interested in a technology career, no matter where you're at. There's people in there who have been programming for years, and they're like, I do this all day, but what the heck? I'm going to do this 100-day challenge, right? So anyways, those are some resources that I would definitely recommend. What do you tell people when people come to you and they're like, hey, I want to get into technology or development or whatever? Where do you point them? What resources do you find helpful for them?
Yeah, this depends on whether they have some previous work already done or not. For example, they've done some course or haven't done a course. If they're just really beginning, I usually recommend them some resources that either I liked or some people that I know and I can trust them with their reviews. So resources they liked or they thought that are useful, and that's one part. Learning by reading, by doing courses is one thing, but the best way to actually get all this knowledge into you, so you have the muscle memory for writing code, for example, is by doing your own projects, doing whatever you imagine that is possible, building it, and you can do it on your own. For example, the way I started learning Python was that I was a contributor to a web page. I was actually writing articles there, and it was possible to put down the HTML tags to format the articles. And it was really cumbersome, and a lot of editors did know nothing about HTML, so it was even worse to them. They were, okay, why do I have to put those strange characters to get the bold? Why can't I just, hit bold and have it? So I figured out, okay, maybe I'll write an editor that lets you write down an article, do all the formatting you want, and then it would all output the code that the web page required. And I figured, okay, there's this cool new language called Python. Maybe I'll try writing it in that one. And yeah, that's how my adventure with Python started, like 18 years ago or so. So it was really cool. So that's the one way. The other way, even better way, would be to gather some people around an idea and build a project together. This way, you not only learn how to code, how to build things, but also how to collaborate with others, which in tech is basically
it's a big deal.
One of the most important things, because the things we build are so complex that no single person probably can, manage anything more complex than really just the simplest idea. So we need collaboration. We need people who can communicate ideas, who can understand what to do, how to do it, how to approach it, how not to step on each other's foot, and so on. So this might be even a better approach for learning, quick learning.
The other benefit from, there's a lot of benefits, but another benefit from collaborating is, when you're working through a problem and I can go to you and say, I'm stuck. What do you think? And, if you get 3 or 4 people involved in this project, you're going to have 3 or 4 completely different ways of addressing problems. And I think it's a great way to expand your mind and think differently. Let's switch gears just real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. So a few days ago on Twitter, I saw from Erica Baker. She says, when venturing into the tech world, what would you suggest is the most important to get out of these 3 options? A degree, build a portfolio, or earn certifications? And I have very strong opinion on that. I'm guessing you do too, but talk through each of those 3 things: a degree, a portfolio, and certifications.
Yeah, so degree will basically vary from one school to another. It's really different across universities. I know that programs are really different. I was amazed when I started working with a Colombian friend of mine that he said that their curriculum at the university was really different from what I had at my university. And I was amazed that, for example, they didn't have one thing, and was also surprised that they have something other that I really missed when I was studying. So this isn't something that I can give a universal answer to, but a degree definitely takes some long time. You learn a lot of great things that are foundational. So, for example, the computer science, the everything related to informational technology, information processing, why the bits are called bits and what do they really represent, etc., etc., etc. But you usually, that was my experience at least, uh, don't learn a lot of actual hands-on stuff on how to build things. You get a lot of theoretical background, which is great once you start building things, because you know that, for example, you can't do it that way because it will take 100,000 years to compute. Instead, changing the approach would make it end up in like an hour or so. So
Yeah.
that's definitely thing that is important. But if you want to be productive, that's not the quickest, the best approach, I would say. So the next thing was building a portfolio.
Hmm.
And yeah, my
We
strong
talked a
opinion,
lot about that already.
would be that this is probably the best thing that you can do. Uh, because frankly, even if you get a lot of theoretical knowledge at the university, you will most likely forget it after like a few months if you are not practicing. And
Hmm.
if you are practicing, you will probably also learn some of the theory, because you run into obstacles that you have no idea how to get out of, and then you will be forced to learn. And learning from your own mistakes, although it is costly and not really pleasant, is also the way that sticks the most, because you can always imagine yourself, oh, this was that time when I messed things up really, really bad. I remember I had to use this algorithm and this data structure for it because everything else was a total mess. So building a portfolio using different projects, different approaches, trying to learn by messing things up is really, really a great way to learn.
Yep.
And as for certifications, certifications usually have also some recommended coursework to do before taking them. So these are usually designed to make sure that you understand a given technology, that you can operate in the given technology, that you are fairly proficient. Uh, but it will also vary from one certificate authority to another, whether the certification is really worth it, whether it checks deeply if you can build your own project, for example, and design it, or whether you're just able to memorize a lot of things and be able to select A, B, C, D answers. So
That's
there
been the
really,
big
Mhm.
issue of certifications forever. I remember 20 years ago, people were like, well, they have a certification, but they just went to a boot camp for a week or two, paid tons of money, and they learned how to pass the test. But I
Yes,
remember somebody saying they don't even know how to turn the server on. Like they're certified, but they don't know anything and how to do this.
that's
So
possible. Yes.
here's my take on this. If you feel like you need to get a degree, okay, you
Mhm.
don't need a degree to be a developer. There's proof of that all over the place.
Yes.
Having a degree doesn't necessarily make you a better developer, but if you feel like it's something you have to do, right? Because you have
Mhm.
family pressure or you've always wanted a degree or whatever, what I would
Yeah.
say is get into your first dev job however you can, whether you take some certifications and use that to get into a job, whether you go to a boot camp, a 12-week boot camp and learn how to do whatever and leverage that to get into a job, whether you build your own portfolio with projects like what you've been talking about a lot, and that leads to interviews and quantifies you as some degree of proficient, and that gets you a job. I would say get a degree while you're working as a developer. First of all, the money typically is really good. You can support yourself, you can support your family, and the urgency has gone away, right? It's not like, I'm going to spend the next 4 to 6 years working on a CS degree, which is really hard. Okay. And it's very expensive generally. I mean, I'm sure there's ways you can do it for less money, but if you're going full time, then you're not working as much, or you're probably not working, at what you could be making. So my advice, if you were to come to me, I would say, go get started, 100 Days of Code, watch some of the beginner courses at Pluralsight, maybe get a certification or two, but try and get your first internship or whatever, start working. Maybe after a year, you can go somewhere else and make double what you're making that you did as an intern. And then when the time is right, if you feel like it's important, decide to go back and get your CS degree. My guess is after working in industry around people who are doing this stuff, you're probably going to find out that like not very many people have degrees, or the people that have degrees, it's not really important or meaningful in their career. I'm not saying that generally or as a blanket statement that they're not important, but you're going to find out that you're working with some great programmers who are on a great career path, who are making great money. They don't have a degree. They don't plan on getting a degree. Every day is an education for them because they're learning new technology.
Yes, I would say that this is a question of how you approach things. So you can finish with a degree by just passing by, but then end at this point and learn nothing new because you just don't want to learn this. You went to a degree because your parents said that you would get a great job, so yeah, that's what you did, right? But you don't really feel like doing it anymore, or you don't want to grow, you don't want to learn. And there are people who are really excited about learning new things. They're curious. They want to try different courses. They want to understand why a thing is or is not working. And with them, it's just a matter of time when they learn all the necessary stuff, because sooner or later they will have an issue with something. Somebody, for example, another person with a degree would say that, this algorithm you use is an O notation of n squared, and it should be less. And the first person would, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll find out what this means and how can I make it better. And this way they learn about the O notation, they learn about algorithm complexity, they learn about other things. It's possible to do it on your own schedule, on your own time, not necessarily having a degree. I'm not saying that degree is bad. You can also go, for example, work full-time and go get a degree during the weekends, which will probably make some of the things you already know much stronger, and the knowledge would just stick better. But it's a question of drive. It's a question of what really motivates you to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, let's wrap this up. I'm going to come back to your author page. If you're looking for Piotr's courses on Pluralsight, what I do, the easiest way I find it is I type in his first name, because that's easier to spell than your last name, and then Pluralsight in Google, and your courses come right up at the top. So great stuff. Thank you. You're also on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to reach out to him, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully it helps people make some decisions as they move forward in their career.
Thank you very much for hosting.